Money can buy private jets, armored cars, luxury penthouses, and the best security in the world, but it can't buy common sense. Throughout history, some of the richest and most powerful people on the planet have met shockingly foolish ends, not in dramatic heists or grand conspiracies, but in moments of pure carelessness, ego, or bizarre accidents. In this video, we're counting down 5 moments where the rich met unbelievably stupid endings.
And a rather bizarre death to report this morning of the British man who now owns the Segway company. You may be familiar with the Segway. It sort of looks like an electric scooter. Turns out he was found dead at the bottom of a cliff.
Jimmy Heselden wasn't born into luxury. He started out as a coal miner in northern England, the kind of man who worked with his hands, breathed in dust, and built his fortune from the ground up. After losing his job during the mining layoffs of the 1980s, he used his redundancy money to start a small business. That gamble turned into something massive. His invention, the Hesco Bastion, a collapsible barrier used to protect soldiers from explosions, was shipped to war zones across the world. Governments bought them by the thousands. By the late 2000s, Heselden wasn't just successful, he was worth hundreds of millions. He was also known as a generous man. He donated millions to charities, supported wounded veterans, and helped build community foundations in his hometown. To many people, he was the perfect rags to riches story. A former miner who became one of the wealthiest men in the United Kingdom. Then, in December 2009, he made a move that put him in the global spotlight. He bought the company behind one of the most recognizable gadgets on the planet, the Segway. That strange, self-balancing scooter had once been hyped as the future of transportation, and now it belonged to him. It was a symbol of innovation, wealth, and success, and for a short time, everything seemed perfect. But just 9 months later, on a quiet morning in September 2010, something went terribly wrong. Heselden was out near his countryside home in West Yorkshire, riding one of the rugged Segway models. It wasn't a publicity stunt or a grand event. It was just a simple ride, the kind of everyday moment no one thinks twice about. He was reportedly walking his dog along a path near a steep drop. Another dog walker approached, and Heselden tried to maneuver the Segway to make space. In that single, ordinary moment, everything changed. As he reversed, the ground behind him disappeared. The Segway rolled backward over the edge of a 30-foot cliff, and Heselden plunged into the river below. The same device he now owned, the same machine that represented his latest business success, had just carried him straight over the edge. Rescuers later found the Segway in the water nearby. The injuries were severe, and the coroner ruled that he died from multiple blunt force injuries to his chest and spine. He was 62 years old. The shock wasn't just about the accident. It was the irony that made headlines around the world. A man worth more than $300 million, a philanthropist, an inventor, and the owner of the Segway company, had died while writing one of his own products. Not in a boardroom, not in a dramatic corporate battle, but in a quiet countryside accident that lasted only seconds. When his estate was settled, more than $340 million was left to his family. It was the fortune he had spent decades building. But the story people remembered wasn't the millions, the charity, or the inventions. It was the image of a wealthy entrepreneur riding a futuristic scooter and vanishing over the edge in a moment no one saw coming.
The young millionaire, the Igbo tycoon who died tragically at a time he was to be celebrating his birthday.
Victor Nnamdi Okafor, better known as Ezego, or the King of Money, lived a life that many could only dream of, and yet his story ended in a way no one could have predicted. Born on December 25, 1964, into humble beginnings in Uzoakwa, Ahiala, in Anambra State, Nigeria, Ezego's childhood was fraught with hardship, family disputes, and controversy. From a young age, he displayed both resilience and audacity, but formal education was never his path. He dropped out of school early, and as a teenager he allegedly became involved with local criminal activities, which eventually forced him to flee his hometown. What might have been a life of obscurity or misfortune, Ezego turned into opportunity. By 1989, he had relocated to Lagos with nothing but ambition and a vision to build wealth that would make him legendary. Ezego's rise was meteoric. Within a few short years, he transformed himself into one of Nigeria's wealthiest and most flamboyant businessmen. Starting with small trade ventures, he quickly mastered the art of networking and strategic partnerships. He expanded into electronics, real estate, and import-export businesses, leveraging every connection he could make to grow his empire. He built an empire of electronic stores, real estate ventures, and luxury properties, including over 70 houses across Nigeria and a N500 million mansion in Ihiala, with Italian imported marble and elaborate interiors that showcased his taste for extravagance. His car collection alone was worth nearly $1 billion naira, featuring Lincolns, Porsches, Mercedes convertibles, Lexus SUVs, and a fleet of other luxury vehicles paraded in grand convoys that left admirers and competitors alike stunned. He lived not just luxuriously but ostentatiously. His birthday celebrations were the stuff of legend, attended by celebrities and elites, often featuring live music, performances, and feasts that lasted for days. Ezego was not shy about showing his wealth. His mansions, businesses, and vehicles were symbols of power and status. Yet, behind the glamour and public celebrations, there was a recklessness that foreshadowed tragedy, a willingness to take risks that many would avoid, and a certain bravado that sometimes ignored the dangers around him. On his birthday, in 1999, Ezego did something unthinkable. For a man who had always relied on a personal chauffeur, he chose that day to drive himself. It was meant to be a simple drive, a personal touch to his birthday celebration as he traveled from Lagos to his hometown of Ihiala for his annual Christmas and birthday festivities. But fate intervened. While towing a broken-down vehicle on the Onitsha-Owerri road, the chain connecting the two cars snapped. The Lexus he was driving collided violently with the towed Cherokee, sending Ezego hurtling into a deep roadside ditch. Emergency responders rushed him to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Ihiala, but the hospital was poorly equipped for a man with such severe injuries. Treatment was delayed, and despite desperate attempts to stabilize him, Ezego succumbed to internal bleeding, passing away the day after his 35th birthday. The irony was stark and almost poetic. The man who had amassed unimaginable wealth and lived a life of grandeur died performing a task he rarely ever undertook, driving himself. The news sent shockwaves across Nigeria. His empire, meticulously built over a decade, began to crumble almost immediately. Abandoned mansions, rusting luxury vehicles, and a community wary of the origins of his wealth became silent reminders of his sudden absence. Family disputes erupted over inheritance, leading to lengthy lawsuits. Even the lawyer entrusted with executing Ezego's will, Barnabas Igwe, was later murdered alongside his wife under mysterious circumstances, fueling speculation of foul play. Rumors swirled that some of his business associates had sought to capitalize on his untimely death, and his fortune became the center of intrigue, betrayal, and tragedy. Beyond the material loss, Ezego's story left a cultural imprint. In the communities where he had operated, stories of his larger-than-life persona mixed with cautionary tales of greed, ambition, and the perils of flashy wealth. His former properties, once symbols of his success, fell into disrepair. His iconic mansion in Ihiala was abandoned, and Ezego Crescent, a street that bore his name and reputation, became a ghostly relic of his life. Even decades later, his life continues to fascinate, with documentaries, articles, and public debates dissecting how such a meteoric rise could end so abruptly. It was June 10, 2015, in a quiet neighborhood park on the outskirts of Fresno, California. The late afternoon sun hung high, baking the wide grass fields that stretched between walking paths and a small playground. Families lingered in the shade, and scattered groups of teens were enjoying the open space. Elaine Porter, 46, lived just a few blocks away and had a daily routine of walking through the park at the same time each afternoon. Those who knew her described Elaine as decisive, impatient, and unafraid to confront situations she thought were wrong. That day, her sharp instincts would tragically collide with misfortune. A group of teenagers had gathered in the open field to fly remote-controlled airplanes. One small gas-powered plane soared low, circling before climbing again, while a second rested idly on the grass. Elaine, walking along the paved path, noticed the activity and instantly deemed it inappropriate. She stopped, turning toward the teens, and began shouting at them to leave. Her voice carried across the field, sharp and commanding. Rather than continuing along the path, she stepped off the pavement and strode across the grass toward the group, her eyes fixed on the grounded plane. In a sudden act of frustration, she grabbed the aircraft by its wing and flung it aside. The frame cracked on impact, scattering debris across the grass. Nearby, park-goers shouted for her to stop, warning her of the dangers, but Elaine ignored them. Her focus shifted to the plane, still in the air. She raised her arms and stepped forward, directly into its flight path. The operator reacted frantically, attempting to pull the plane away, but it was too late. The aircraft dipped briefly, then surged forward under power. In an instant, the spinning propeller struck Elaine across her upper chest and neck. The plane broke apart on impact, fragments flying several feet as she collapsed backward onto the grass. Silence fell over the field, broken only by the stunned gasps of witnesses. Blood flowed rapidly, and Elaine could not speak. Park-goers called 911 immediately, their voices trembling with panic. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but despite their efforts, she remained unresponsive. She was transported to a nearby hospital, but the injuries were too severe. Elaine Porter was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death as catastrophic soft tissue injury and blood loss from the aircraft's propeller. The death was ruled accidental. In the months that followed, the city acted to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. Remote-controlled aircraft were restricted to designated zones. Warning signs were posted near pedestrian areas, and hobbyists were redirected to approved flying fields. Yet, for those who witnessed that afternoon, the memory of a routine walk turned catastrophic lingered. One moment, Elaine had been following her usual path. The next, a split-second decision put her directly in the path of deadly machinery. The park reopened under updated safety policies, but the haunting lesson remained clear. Sometimes, an impulse to correct what seems wrong can collide with reality in the most devastating way imaginable. At first glance, it looked like a tragedy. A motorcycle twisted on the asphalt, police vehicles blocking the road. A young man lying motionless beside his helmet while bystanders whispered the same frightened question. Is he dead? On September 30th in the Philippines, commuters slowed their cars, convinced they were witnessing another senseless road fatality. What they didn't know was that the entire scene had been choreographed. Not for an investigation, but for a marriage proposal. And that is where the story turns uncomfortable. The man at the center of it all was Jeffrey Del Rio. According to witnesses, he had planned everything with military precision. Friends played the roles of emergency responders. Someone posed as a police officer to divert traffic. The motorcycle was laid on its side like a wounded animal. Jeffrey himself practiced how still a body should look. His girlfriend arrived, believing she was about to identify the man she loved. Video taken by onlookers shows her rushing toward the scene, hands over her mouth, eyes wide with panic. For several agonizing seconds, she believed she was living the worst day of her life. Then the corpse moved. Jeffrey suddenly came back to life, pulled out a ring, and asked her to marry him. Applause replaced sirens. Fear was expected to transform into joy. The crowd cheered as if they had just watched a romantic comedy climax instead of emotional torture. But not everyone was clapping. What happens inside a person during those seconds when they believe their partner is dead? Psychologists later criticized the stunt as emotional manipulation dressed up as romance. Trauma, they warned, does not disappear simply because the victim is told it was a joke. The brain records terror before it records relief. There were other dangers too. Dangers Jeffrey seemed not to consider. Cars braking suddenly on a busy road. Untrained actors pretending to be authorities. The possibility that a real ambulance might ignore an actual emergency because people assumed it was another prank. One wrong move, one startled driver, and the fake tragedy could have become very real. Jeffrey defended the idea, saying he wanted a proposal she would never forget. He was right about that. What he misunderstood was the difference between unforgettable and unforgivable. Love built on deception walks a fragile line. For some viewers, the moment looked sweet. For others, it felt like watching a hostage forced to smile. Local officials later condemned the act, reminding the public that impersonating police and staging accidents is illegal and dangerous. But by then, the video had already gone viral, inspiring copycats and sparking debates across social media. How far is too far for a perfect moment? When does creativity become cruelty? No one died that day in the Philippines, but death was invited to the rehearsal. The scene contained all the ingredients of a real disaster: speeding traffic, emotional shock, public confusion. It survived on luck alone. And luck is not a safety plan. Jeffrey's proposal ended with a yes. It could just as easily have ended with a siren that wasn't part of the script. In the age of viral love, the most dangerous weapon isn't a knife or a cliff or deep water. Sometimes it's an idea that sounds romantic in someone's head. It was December 25th, 2013, in a quiet suburban home in Columbus, Ohio. The afternoon was warm, the windows closed to keep the air conditioning in, and the kitchen was crowded with family. Laughter bouncing off the walls as everyone gathered for Christmas. Tara Whitman, 33, ran a small event rental business and loved sharing party tricks online, but those who knew her described her as assertive, hands-on, and unwilling to be corrected, especially around younger family members. That afternoon, her decisiveness would have fatal consequences. A couple of teenage nephews were preparing a cola and Mentos experiment they had seen online. A 2-liter bottle sat upright in the kitchen sink, carefully positioned so the eruption would shoot upward and drain safely. Phones were ready to record, and adults were trying to keep the teens cautious, warning them not to touch the bottle once the reaction began and to step back immediately. Tara, however, laughed at the precautions. She dismissed their warnings, insisting she had done similar tricks before and that they were overthinking it. "Relax," she told them, brushing off the instructions. Then, without hesitation, Tara abruptly lifted the bottle from the sink. Someone warned her to put it back, to step away, but she snapped that she wasn't a child and didn't need instructions. She leaned closer to the counter, holding the bottle steady as a nephew dropped the Mentos inside. The reaction was immediate. Foam and soda surged violently, shooting upward far faster than anyone anticipated. Instead of setting the bottle down or stepping back, Tara raised it toward her mouth, apparently attempting to drink from it. In an instant, the pressurized soda flooded her mouth and throat, far beyond what could be swallowed or expelled safely. She began choking and gagging, her body convulsing as the bottle slipped from her grip and slammed against the sink. Soda and foam spilled across the counter, slicking the kitchen floor. Disoriented and panicked, Tara bent forward, struggling to breathe, trying to step back. Her foot slipped on the wet tile, and she fell hard, striking the back of her head and upper neck against the sharp edge of the countertop before collapsing onto the floor. Family members rushed forward, watching in horror as she coughed violently, then grew eerily still. Within moments, Tara became unresponsive. 911 was called immediately. Family members tried desperately to keep her airway clear as they waited for paramedics. When emergency responders arrived, she was unresponsive on the kitchen floor, showing signs of severe head and neck trauma. Despite their efforts with oxygen support and advanced emergency care, Tara did not regain consciousness. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later ruled her death as blunt force trauma to the head, with acute aspiration of carbonated liquid and a panic-induced loss of balance listed as contributing factors. Investigators confirmed the soda and candy reaction itself functioned normally, and no foul play, equipment malfunction, or poisoning was involved. What began as a festive demonstration had turned into a sudden, tragic accident. For those present that day, the memory lingered like a shadow over the holiday: the sound of the fizzing soda, the slip on the wet tile, the chaos of panic, and the chilling reminder that even a simple experiment, when mixed with overconfidence and a moment's misjudgment, can turn deadly in seconds.
The great playwright died in New York City in 1983 under circumstances so strange that it took multiple examinations to figure out what happened.
Tennessee Williams, one of America's most celebrated playwrights, lived a life of brilliance, glamour, and quiet torment. Yet his end was as shocking as it was absurdly simple. Born Thomas Lanier Williams III in 1911 in Columbus, Mississippi, he grew up amid a household of contradictions. A deeply religious grandfather, a mother struggling with an unhappy marriage, and a father prone to violent temper and alcoholism. His early life was marked by frailty, illness, and confinement, which left him weak but observant, a young boy absorbing the intense emotions around him. These early hardships would seep into the fabric of his plays, giving voice to fragile characters, intense desires, and the loneliness of the human condition. Williams was haunted by the story of his sister Rose, who developed schizophrenia in her youth and endured a lobotomy that left her institutionalized for life. Devoted to her care, he provided her a share of his royalties, a gesture that revealed a generosity born of guilt, love, and family obligation. The shadow of Rose's fate loomed over him, shaping his fears of insanity and his fragile relationship with stability. Despite, or perhaps because of, these early struggles, he discovered writing as salvation. By the time he reached his 20s, he was producing stories, poems, and plays with feverish intensity, often working late into the night fueled by black coffee and cigarettes. His literary breakthrough came at age 33 with The Glass Menagerie, a play born from memory, loss, and longing. It was an instant sensation, capturing audiences with its raw humanity and fragile beauty. This success was swiftly followed by A Streetcar Named Desire. Period of stability and happiness. Merlot's death from lung cancer in 1963 plunged him into despair, exacerbating his dependency on alcohol and drugs and leading to years of mental and emotional instability. Despite these struggles, Williams continued to write, though many of his later works never achieved the acclaim of his earlier triumphs. By the early 1980s, Williams' life had settled into an uneasy rhythm of solitude, creative effort, and the lingering shadow of loss. He feared aging and losing his allure to younger men, and he was haunted by memories of failed relationships and the inexorable passage of time. And then, in 1983, the unthinkable happened. In a New York hotel room, Tennessee Williams, a man who had witnessed the extremes of human emotion, succumbed to a death both trivial and tragic. He choked on a plastic cap from a bottle of eye drop solution. Later reports clarified that he had been using it to ingest barbiturates, and that a toxic level of secobarbital had contributed to his demise. A man whose life was filled with drama, triumph, and deep emotional currents was undone by the simplest of accidents. In his will, Williams expressed a desire to be buried at sea, near the spot where the poet Hart Crane had met the same fate, a testament to his lifelong connection to art, death, and the sea. Yet, his brother arranged for him to be laid to rest in St. Louis, Missouri, alongside their mother. Most of his estate eventually went to the University of the South in Tennessee, ensuring that his legacy would continue to nurture creativity and literature for generations to come.
A murder has come to light in Telangana days after Swati's brutal murder. A 22-year-old man killed a 19-year-old student in broad daylight in Telangana's Adilabad district after she rejected his advances.
In the quiet streets of Bhainsa town in India's Telangana state, an ordinary afternoon in July turned into a grim murder that shocked an entire community. What should have been a normal day in a close-knit neighborhood instead became a scene of horror, one that residents would remember for years to come. The victim was just 18 years old, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. For nearly 2 years, a local youth named Mahesh had been pursuing her, telling others he was in love and wanted to marry her. According to police, the two lived in the same area and were familiar with one another, which made the situation even more unsettling for neighbors who had seen their interactions over time. But the girl's family had advised her against the relationship, and she ultimately rejected his proposal. That rejection appears to have triggered the tragedy. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the girl stood outside her home, going about her routine. At around 2:30 p.m., Mahesh approached her. Instead of accepting her decision or walking away, he allegedly confronted her with a knife. Police later said he attacked her in front of her own house and slit her throat in full public view. She died on the spot before anyone could intervene. Witnesses described the attack as sudden and shocking. There was little warning, and by the time neighbors realized what was happening, it was already too late. The violence lasted only moments, but its impact was devastating not just for the victim's family, but for the entire community that had watched her grow up. Investigators later revealed that the girl's family had already arranged her marriage to another man, and she was expected to be married soon. This development may have intensified Mahesh's frustration, as police said he had been pressuring her to accept his proposal for months. After the attack, Mahesh fled the scene, but police moved quickly. A murder case was registered at Baiansa police station, and the accused was taken into custody shortly afterward. Authorities confirmed that the motive was directly linked to the rejected proposal and his obsession with marrying her. In some reports, it was also revealed that the victim had previously complained about his harassment, suggesting that the violence did not come completely out of nowhere, but was the culmination of months of unwanted attention and pressure. Unlike accidental deaths caused by risky stunts or misguided romantic gestures, this case represents something darker, a crime driven by entitlement and the refusal to accept rejection. It highlights a recurring pattern seen in similar cases across the region, where the word no is treated not as a decision, but as an insult to be avenged. For the victim's family, the loss was immeasurable. One moment, they were preparing for her future. The next, they were planning her funeral. For the town of Baiansa, the incident became a painful reminder of how quickly obsession can turn into violence when respect and consent are ignored. In official records, the case would be reduced to a few lines. An 18-year-old girl killed after rejecting a marriage proposal, accused arrested, investigation ongoing. But behind those brief summaries lies a shattered family, a life cut short, and a community left grappling with the chilling consequences of rejection, taken as rage rather than a simple human choice. It was April 21st, 2018, at a busy city zoo in Omaha, Nebraska. Janelle Mercer, 31, was there with a small group of acquaintances. She worked as a retail supervisor and had joined the outing as a casual way to spend the day. People who knew her often described her as someone who disliked being corrected, especially in public. Rules, warnings, and signs tended to irritate her. If she believed something was unnecessary, she was the type to challenge it rather than follow it. To her, restrictions often felt like personal annoyances rather than safety measures. Near one of the exhibits, a viewing area had been partially closed. Barriers and warning signs blocked access to a section that overlooked the enclosure. Beyond the main railing was a narrow maintenance ledge scattered with loose gravel, an area never meant for visitors. It sloped gently downward toward a dry concrete moat that separated the public from the exhibit below. Zoo staff had closed it earlier due to crowding and poor visibility, hoping to prevent exactly the kind of accident that would soon unfold. When Janelle reached the barrier, she stopped. Instead of moving along like the others, she began arguing with a nearby employee. Witnesses later recalled her insisting the closure made no sense. From where she stood, the area looked harmless, just a few feet of concrete beyond a rail. The staff member calmly explained the restriction and asked her to continue down the path, but Janelle refused. Her voice grew louder, sharper, drawing the attention of nearby visitors. She waved a hand toward the ledge and dismissed the warnings as exaggerated and unnecessary. A few people slowed their steps to watch the confrontation. Some exchanged uneasy glances. Others quietly urged her to just move along. But Janelle seemed determined to prove her point. Then, in full view of the crowd, she climbed over the barrier. Surveillance footage later showed her lifting herself over the rail, one leg at a time, stepping into the restricted area. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. The maintenance ledge beneath her feet was narrow and uneven, scattered with loose stones that shifted under the slightest pressure. There were no handrails, no guardrails, nothing meant to support foot traffic. It was a space designed only for trained staff with proper footing and caution. Janelle turned back toward the public walkway as if to prove there was nothing to fear. For a brief moment, she stood there confidently, shoulders squared, almost triumphant. But as she shifted her stance, her heels slid on the gravel. The tiny stones rolled beneath her shoes, stealing her balance in an instant. Her footing vanished almost immediately. She reached back toward the railing, fingers stretching for something solid, but her hand grasped nothing but empty air. In that split second, her center of gravity tipped too far. There was no barrier to stop her, no second chance to correct her balance. She fell backward into the dry moat below. Witnesses heard the sharp, sickening impact as her head struck the concrete. The lively chatter of the zoo dissolved into stunned silence. A few people screamed. Others covered their mouths in disbelief. Her body lay motionless at the bottom of the enclosure. Zoo staff rushed to the edge within seconds. One employee descended carefully using a nearby access ladder, calling out to her as he approached. But Janelle showed no signs of consciousness or movement. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived and began resuscitation attempts, working urgently on the concrete floor of the moat. But there was nothing they could do. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later determined the cause of death was severe blunt force trauma to the head, along with a high cervical spine fracture. Injuries consistent with a backward fall onto concrete. Investigators confirmed the barriers had been intact and functioning as designed. There was no equipment failure, no hidden hazard, only a clearly marked restricted area that had been ignored. In the aftermath, the zoo installed taller barriers, expanded warning signs, and increased staff presence near similar enclosures during busy hours. Visitors would later notice the changes without knowing exactly why they were there. But for those who witnessed the incident, the memory lingered. A normal afternoon, a simple rule, a moment of stubborn defiance, and a fall that ended everything in an instant. It was May 28, 2016, in a sprawling Mesa, Arizona big box store parking lot. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the temperature hovered under an extreme heat advisory. Kelsey Hart, 29, had parked her car under the blazing sun. Her 2-year-old son, Owen, strapped into a rear-facing car seat in the back. The windows were mostly closed, the engine off, and Kelsey believed she'd be inside only briefly. Inside the store, a small disagreement quickly escalated into a heated confrontation. At the customer service counter, Kelsey demanded a refund without a receipt. Voices rose, tension crackled in the air, and nearby shoppers stepped back, uneasy. Staff noticed her flushed face, her rapid movements, and the agitation that seemed to go far beyond a simple return. Outside, the heat was silently building inside the car, trapping Owen in an environment that was quickly becoming dangerous. Owen cried at first, then grew quiet, his small body beginning to succumb to the oppressive heat. Minutes ticked by, unnoticed by Kelsey, consumed as she was by her argument. Inside, she felt frustrated and annoyed. Outside, the sun turned the car into a furnace. 30 agonizing minutes passed before a shopper walking past noticed the child alone, unresponsive, in the parked car. Panic set in. The shopper tried the doors they were locked on. Another bystander grabbed a tire iron, breaking the rear window, and they pulled Owen into the shade. People poured water on his clothing, fanned him, and waited desperately for paramedics. Kelsey finally rushed out, her anger flaring at the sight of the shattered window and broken glass. Her focus was immediate on the car, on the damage. She shouted, pacing, striking the door frame, oblivious to the paramedics working to save her son. Her voice remained raised, her energy frantic, every step driven by outrage and disbelief. Witnesses said she seemed unsteady, her movement slowing as the heat, the stress, and the adrenaline combined into something dangerous. Then it happened. Her balance faltered, her voice cut off mid-shout, and she staggered backward. She crashed headfirst into the base of a metal signpost, the asphalt unforgiving beneath her. The impact was severe, and she lay motionless, her body silent in the chaos she had created. Paramedics scrambled to her side, but it was too late. Despite their advanced life support efforts, Kelsey was pronounced dead in the parking lot. The medical examiner later ruled the cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest, with the head trauma contributing to her collapse. Heat stress and acute emotional agitation had combined into a lethal storm. Owen survived, treated for heat exposure, and released days later. But the memory of that day lingered over the parking lot like a shadow. Store officials installed warnings about children left in vehicles under heat advisories, but nothing could erase the chilling lesson. Moments of anger and distraction, compounded by the merciless Arizona sun, can turn routine errands into tragedy in the blink of an eye.
The billionaire banker who was seemingly murdered in his penthouse in Monaco, which is ironically considered the safest country for the wealthy.
Edmond Safra, one of the wealthiest and most influential bankers in the world, lived a life of power, privilege, and precision, but his end came in the most shocking and senseless way imaginable. Born in Beirut in 1932 to a family of Sephardic Jewish bankers originally from Aleppo, Syria, Safra inherited a legacy of finance and ambition. By the time he was a teenager, he was already immersed in his father's banking business, learning the ins and outs of precious metals and foreign exchange. The family eventually moved to Italy, then Brazil, where Safra began shaping the empire that would make him a billionaire and a global financial force. By the 1980s, his banks had grown into multi-billion-dollar institutions, and his wealth extended across Geneva, New York, Monaco, and beyond. His clients were some of the richest and most powerful people on the planet, and his reputation for discretion, intelligence, and unmatched financial acumen was legendary. Safra was not only a financier, but a philanthropist of remarkable vision. He devoted vast sums of money to causes spanning education, medicine, and religion. He built and renovated synagogues in cities across the globe, saved historic Jewish sites from destruction, and supported hospitals from Sao Paulo to Tel Aviv. In New York, he endowed the Edmond J. Safra Synagogue, while in Israel, he contributed to the construction of the Edmund and Lily Safra Children's Hospital. His generosity extended to medical research, supporting Parkinson's studies, cancer research, and healthcare institutions worldwide. Even without a university education, he championed higher education, establishing scholarships, professorships, and research centers in some of the world's most prestigious institutions, ensuring that his legacy would influence future generations. Yet, despite all his accomplishments, his life ended in a way that no amount of money or influence could prevent. On December 3, 1999, at his luxurious penthouse in Monaco, a fire erupted that would take his life. The blaze was no accident. Investigators revealed that the fire had been deliberately set by one of his own security guards in a twisted attempt to stage a heroic rescue. The plan went horribly wrong, spiraling out of control and trapping Safra in the smoke-filled mansion. Despite the sophisticated security of his residence, Safra could not escape. He and his nurse, Vivian Torrente, were suffocated by the smoke. The man he trusted to protect him had become the architect of his death. The shock of Safra's death rippled across the world. Here was a man who had meticulously built his life around precision, control, and foresight, only to fall victim to a reckless and ill-conceived act of ambition from someone he trusted implicitly. The tragedy was compounded by his frail health. Safra had been battling Parkinson's disease and required nursing care, a vulnerability that made the fire even more deadly. News of his death stunned the financial world, and the circumstances surrounding it sent shivers down the spines of anyone who had ever considered themselves untouchable. Even in death, Safra's influence continued to be felt. Half of his immense fortune was directed to charitable causes, ensuring that his wealth would continue to impact lives around the world. His philanthropic initiatives, from education and healthcare to religious preservation and scientific research, remain living monuments to his vision and generosity. Yet, the image of a billionaire banker, suffocated in his own home by the very person he entrusted with his protection, remains one of the most chilling tales of wealth, trust, and human folly.
In a shocking incident of a broad daylight murder in a posh area of South Delhi, a man battered his cousin to death with an iron rod because she had refused to marry him and he was finding it difficult to get anyone else to agree either.
History likes to describe marriage as a union of love. Police files tell a different story. Across decades and continents, the simple act of asking for a hand in marriage has sometimes carried an unspoken threat. In places where honor outweighs choice, a proposal is not always a question. It is a negotiation of power, and when that negotiation fails, the result can be fatal. These are not reckless stunts or accidents of bad planning. These are killings rooted in pride, ownership, and the dangerous belief that a woman's answer is not hers to give. Investigators from South Asia to the Middle East describe eerily similar case files. A family refuses a proposal. The rejected suitor feels humiliated. Rumors spread about dishonor. Violence follows. Sometimes the victim is the woman who said no. Sometimes it is a rival suitor, a brother who defended her, or even the man who dared to ask without permission. What links these deaths is not romance, but entitlement. Criminologists studying these cases note that the word proposal is misleading. In many communities, it functions less like a request and more like a claim. To reject it is to challenge a man's status in front of relatives and neighbors and challenge some answer with knives, acid, or bullets. In India, newspapers regularly report young women murdered after refusing marriage offers, their deaths later described as crimes of passion. In Pakistan, families have been attacked for daring to choose their own sons-in-law. In parts of the Middle East, so-called honor killings have been justified with the same chilling logic. She brought shame by saying no. Each culture uses different language, but the motive sounds the same. A proposal becomes a trigger. Rejection becomes rebellion. Rebellion is punished. What makes these cases especially disturbing is how predictable they are. Neighbors often admit they saw warning signs of stalking, threats, obsessive visits, yet no one intervened. The proposal stage is treated as private business until it suddenly becomes a homicide scene. Documentary researchers who interview survivors hear the same sentence again and again. He said, "If I couldn't be his, I wouldn't be anyone's." That phrase appears in testimonies from Delhi, Lahore, Dhaka, and dozens of smaller towns whose names never reach international headlines. To label these deaths as isolated madness is convenient. It avoids the larger question: why does a romantic ritual carry the shadow of violence at all? The answer lies in the way proposals are framed, not as mutual choices, but as transactions involving family honor, social reputation, and male authority. When those pillars are threatened, some men reach for control by the oldest method known. These tragedies remind us that the most dangerous proposals are not the ones performed on cliffs or under oceans. The deadliest are the ordinary ones, spoken in living rooms and marketplaces, where a single word can ignite generations of expectation. The victims of proposal-related violence rarely become symbols. They remain daughters, students, shopkeepers, names that fade after the trial ends. Yet their stories trace a hidden map of how love, when stripped of consent, mutates into something lethal. Every file asks the same uncomfortable question: if a proposal can lead to murder, was it ever really a proposal at all? It was June 17th, 2016, in a quiet Mesa, Arizona neighborhood, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, pushing the temperature to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Families were outside, grills humming and laughter drifting over low fences. Kids ran barefoot across lawns. Dogs barked, and the scent of sizzling meat and charred wood filled the air. Denise Harlow, 44, lived alone in a modest single-story home with a concrete patio and a well-worn propane grill. Known by neighbors as blunt and sometimes argumentative, she had a reputation for dismissing advice she didn't like. She was the kind of person who preferred to trust her own judgment, even if it seemed reckless to others. That day, Denise had planned a small dinner for 2 visiting relatives, a rare occasion that had her excited. She pulled out her old propane grill, which had been sitting uncovered for months, exposed to the harsh Arizona sun. When she connected the tank and tried to light it, nothing happened. A faint hiss of gas escaped, unnoticed at first, but then a neighbor working in his yard caught the smell and shouted a warning. "Denise, you've got a gas leak," he called over the fence. Denise waved him off with a dismissive gesture, raising her voice in return. "I've got this. Don't worry about it," she insisted, leaning over the grill and fiddling with the control knobs again. Her relatives exchanged worried glances. "Maybe we should check the connection, or wait a few minutes," one suggested. Denise snapped, brushing them aside, confident the problem was just air trapped in the line. Minutes passed. The haze of propane thickened, unnoticed by Denise, who was now focused entirely on her grill. Neighbors across the street paused in their work, watching her repeated attempts with growing unease. One woman muttered to herself, "She has no idea what she's doing." As Denise leaned forward for the final adjustment, she lifted the grill lid and peered inside. That was the instant everything went horribly wrong. The gas that had been accumulating ignited in a violent flash, erupting outward with a force that caught Denise completely off guard. Flames struck her across the face, neck, and arms. Her hair ignited for a brief, terrifying moment. She jerked back, knocking over a patio chair and stumbling before hitting the concrete with a heavy thud. The heat seared her skin, and the acrid smell of burning clothes filled the air. Panic erupted among the neighbors. One man grabbed a garden hose and began spraying water directly onto her smoldering clothing. Another lunged to turn off the propane tank, stopping the relentless flow of gas just in time to prevent an even larger explosion. Despite their efforts, Denise remained on the patio, writhing in pain, unable to move. Her relatives screamed, their faces pale and eyes wide with horror. Someone called 911, their voice shaking as they described the scene. Emergency responders arrived within minutes, but the scene was chaotic. The burns were extensive, and Denise was struggling to breathe from the smoke inhalation. She was rushed to the hospital, surrounded by medical personnel who fought desperately to stabilize her, but the injuries were severe, and despite their efforts, she succumbed days later. The official cause of death was listed as complications from the thermal burns and inhalation injuries. For those who had witnessed it, the image of that sudden, violent flash and Denise's collapse would never fade. In the aftermath, the neighborhood was left shaken. Backyards that once smelled of barbecue now felt heavy and tense. Grills remained covered, hoses were replaced, and patios stood empty. A silent reminder of how quickly confidence, or defiance, can turn deadly. Parents warned their children to stay away from anything involving gas or fire, and neighbors, still whispering about the incident months later, carried with them the chilling realization: sometimes, a single, careless decision can change everything in an instant. It was supposed to be a moment pulled straight from a romance film. Instead, it ended like the opening scene of a true crime documentary. The Manta Resort off Pemba Island, Tanzania, is marketed as paradise turquoise water, private floating villas, and a famous underwater bedroom surrounded by glass walls where fish drift past like silent witnesses. Couples travel from across the world to experience it. In September 2019, Stephen Weber and his girlfriend arrived there chasing exactly that fantasy, a memory they could tell for the rest of their lives. No one imagined it would become the story of his death. Weber had prepared something elaborate, not a simple kneel-on-the-beach proposal, but a cinematic gesture designed for that one breathtaking reaction. He wrote his proposal on a handwritten note, sealed it inside a plastic sleeve so the ink wouldn't bleed. He packed goggles and flippers. He chose the underwater room, a glass cube submerged several meters beneath the Indian Ocean, as his stage. From the inside, his girlfriend would be able to watch him through the thick window as he floated outside like a character in an aquarium dream. He would press the note to the glass. Then he would reveal the ring. It was beautiful. It was also dangerously naive. The entire scene was recorded on her phone. In the video, Weber swims into view, kicking slowly in the blue haze. He holds up the laminated paper to the window. The message is simple and nervous, the kind of words a man writes when he can't trust his voice. "I can't hold my breath long enough to tell you everything I love about you. Will you please be my wife?" Then he reaches into his pocket and pulls out the ring. For a few seconds, it looks like the perfect viral love story. Sunlight flickers through the water. Fish circle lazily around him. Inside the room, his girlfriend laughs in disbelief, filming the man she expects to spend her life with. But something is already wrong. His movements seem rushed. His breathing tube is absent. He is relying only on the air in his lungs. The underwater current nudges him slightly away from the window. He kicks again, harder this time, and then the camera keeps rolling as he drifts out of frame. He never returns. Resort staff later confirmed the devastating truth. Steven Weber drowned before he could reach the surface, but the details remain disturbingly thin. Why attempt such a stunt without proper breathing equipment? Why wasn't there a guide or safety diver present? Did he misjudge the depth, the pressure, the distance back to air? Some reports say the room sat around 4 meters underwater, shallow for trained divers, but lethal for someone holding their breath in emotional excitement. Adrenaline burns oxygen faster. Panic steals it even quicker. There is also the eerie fact that his final act was not survival. It was performance. He stayed long enough to finish the proposal, to show the ring, to complete the scene he had imagined in his head. By the time instinct took over, it may already have been too late. His girlfriend posted the video later, calling it the cruelest twist of fate. The internet watched a proposal transform into a man's last recorded breaths. What haunts the footage is not just the death, but the innocence of the idea behind it. The belief that love needs spectacle, that a private promise must become an extreme act to feel real. In the end, the ocean didn't care about the romance. Water filled his lungs the same way it has for centuries. No villain, no conspiracy, just a dream colliding with physics, and a question written on a piece of paper that would never receive its answer. Alfred Lowenstein was one of the wealthiest men in the world, a Belgian financier whose fortune came from daring investments in electricity and synthetic materials at a time when both industries were still in their infancy. By the 1920s, he was a man of immense influence, consulted by heads of state, rubbing shoulders with the elite, and commanding a lifestyle most could only dream of. His wealth was staggering, his success undeniable, yet his end would be as bizarre as it was tragic. A moment so surreal it seemed almost impossible to believe. It was July 4th, 1928, and Lowenstein boarded his private aircraft for a short flight over the English Channel, accompanied by 6 others. The plane, a Fokker trimotor, carried him effortlessly through the sky, and the journey seemed routine. But in those quiet, fleeting minutes, destiny was waiting. Lowenstein reportedly moved to the rear of the plane, intending to use the lavatory. A simple act, a mundane decision. Yet, in the blink of an eye, he vanished. The lavatory was empty. The rear entrance door of the plane was open, flapping violently in the wind. Panic spread among those on board as reality sank in. Alfred Lowenstein, one of the richest men in the world, had fallen out of his own airplane. The flight continued to land, but the mind could not comprehend the scene. How could a man with everything, power, influence, wealth, and intellect, simply disappear into the sky like that? His body was found days later near Boulogne, battered but unmistakably alive when he struck the water. The coroner confirmed the fatal injuries, yet the questions remained. How had it happened? Was it a terrible accident, a moment of absent-mindedness, or something more sinister? Theories swirled. Some whispered of conspiracies among business partners eager for a windfall. Others suggested suicide, or that Lowenstein had been careless, distracted by the pressures of a vast and complicated empire. Some even speculated he had faked his death entirely, vanishing to escape the looming collapse of his ventures. His death sent shockwaves across Europe. Stock markets trembled, companies plummeted, and headlines screamed the impossibility of the event. Lowenstein, a man who had survived the complexities of high finance, the turbulence of business wars, and the scrutiny of the world's most powerful, was undone by a single, silent moment at the back of his plane. He was buried in an unmarked grave, leaving behind a fortune, a mystery, and a story that would fascinate and haunt the world for decades. It's a chilling reminder that no amount of wealth or power can shield anyone from the sheer unpredictability of life, and that sometimes the tiniest mistake can lead to the most unimaginable end. The mountain was supposed to be their witness. Falkert, a quiet peak in the Austrian Alps, is the kind of place lovers choose for photographs. Endless snowfields, clean cold air, the world spread beneath their feet like a promise. For one couple, it was meant to be the backdrop of a perfect beginning. Instead, it became the edge of a nightmare. The couple had hiked up the slopes of Corinthia on a winter day, surrounded by white silence. The boyfriend had planned it carefully, a ring hidden in his pocket, a view dramatic enough to match his courage. At the summit, he knelt, asked the question people rehearse their whole lives, and she answered the way he hoped. She said yes. For a few seconds, the scene looked like every romantic fantasy. Laughter in the thin mountain air. Two people imagining a future together. What they didn't notice was how fragile the ground beneath them had become. Snow and ice had glazed the rock face. One careless step was all it took. Moments after accepting the proposal, the woman lost her footing. Witnesses later described seeing her slide toward the cliff edge, arms flailing, as if the mountain itself had decided to take back the happiness it had just allowed. Then she disappeared, tumbling nearly 650 feet down the slope, a distance longer than most skyscrapers are tall. Her fiancé tried to reach her. In the panic, he slipped as well, falling about 50 feet before managing to grab a small ledge that stopped him from following her into the abyss. From celebration to catastrophe, in less than a heartbeat. Rescue teams were called immediately. Mountain specialists climbed through freezing conditions expecting the worst. Falls from that height usually end in silence, not second chances, but the Alps offered a cruel miracle. Heavy snowdrifts cushioned her descent, slowing her body enough to keep her alive. When rescuers finally reached her, she was injured but conscious, bruised, terrified, yet breathing. Her fiancé was airlifted with a fractured vertebra, proof of how close both of them had come to dying on what was meant to be the happiest day of their relationship. Emergency officials later admitted they were stunned. Statistically, she should not have survived. Investigators treated the incident as an accident, but the story sparked uncomfortable debate. Why choose such a dangerous location for a life-changing moment? How often do couples confuse beauty with safety? And how many proposals depend more on luck than planning? Romance had blinded them to risk, icy ground that offered no grip, steep cliffs with no barriers. Emotional distraction at the very moment balance mattered most. The proposal was meant to prove devotion. Instead, it revealed how easily love can push people beyond reason. The couple eventually recovered, carrying not only a ring, but the memory of how close they came to being another headline. What should have been a story told to grandchildren will always include a darker chapter: helicopters, stretchers, and the long fall between yes and survival. Their engagement photos will never show the snow that saved her life. This incident stands as one of the clearest real examples of how proposal stunts can flirt with death without intending to. No pranks, no fake crashes, just an ordinary couple chasing an extraordinary moment and nearly paying for it with everything. Love asked a question on that mountain. Gravity answered first.